This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, broad-reaching security stories, ransomware implications across multiple industries, Microsoft teases a new version of Windows, the Supreme Court makes changes to crime laws, and why we care as technology providers, new work-from-home data, all this and more. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let's dive right in. The hackers who hit SolarWinds are back. This time, the Nobelium Group has targeted about 3,000 email accounts at more than 150 organizations across 24 countries with phishing attacks. Leveraging the branding of USAID via a compromised constant contact account, this move is the end result of a coordinated effort this entire calendar year. The deployed payload allows persistent access to compromised systems. Microsoft first reported the issue in a blog post and indicated they, quote, are not seeing evidence of any significant number of compromised organizations at this time. In this context, the Defense Secretary told CNN that the U.S. has, quote, offensive options to respond to cyber attacks. The FBI is stepping up their game too. They're going to share compromised passwords with the Have I Been Pwned service. The FBI is also warning of a breach via a FortiGate appliance to access a U.S. municipal government. Yes, this vulnerability had been warned about. Over in the Justice Department more broadly, the DOJ, FBI, and the intelligence community have launched an effort to investigate supply chain threats by Russian companies. That information will be shared with the Commerce Department, which will then decide about possibly prohibiting the use of those technologies. No timeline has been released. In information sharing, the Defense Department is expanding its cybersecurity information sharing program, including allowing small and medium-sized contractors access to information. And the NSA is now running pilots around information sharing as well. The NSA is also offering a free and secure DNS system for those contractors. The department's also issued an update on the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, or CMMC. These rules should be in place by the end of this calendar year. Don't know CMMC? This is a standards and best practices set of guidelines within the Defense Department. All this damage, research from the Ponemon Institute tells us that compromised accounts cost companies an average of $6.2 million each year. From that same report, Microsoft 365 and Google Workplace accounts have been heavily targeted using either brute force or phishing attacks, according to 57% of respondents. 51% of respondents said phishing is the most heavily used method of attack. TechIsle has their data too. 63% of U.S. SMBs report that they experienced one or more cyber attacks in the last year, contributing to an average of 3.6% of revenue loss attributable to security incidents. For 46% of SMBs, preventing cyber attacks is the most pressing and critical IT issues. Yet, 59% of SMBs are very confident that their firms could recover from a cybersecurity incident. In case you thought this would result in less headlines, JBS USA, the world's largest meat supplier, was also the victim of ransomware. The company is not aware that any customer, supplier, or an employee data has been compromised, although it's unclear if consumers may be affected. Now, why do we care? If you want to get consumer attention, first hit them at the gas pump, then make the cost of hamburger go up. The hackers never went away. Why would they? This was a very successful, and so far, they haven't paid a price. Consequences and incentives are my theme lately, and the hackers have plenty of incentive to continue and not a lot of downside. For small providers, remember that phishing attacks are your number one entry point. User training and investment is our best weapon here, combined with basic patch management and two-factor authentication. If you heard my editorial on the weekend, you need to link your own incentives and your customers with the solutions you adopt. If the solutions you use aren't tied to that success, consider other options. On the positive side, there is so much basic information out there, basic guidance from every possible source. On the downside, That's all the data to indicate that customers and providers should know better, and the evidence to be pointed to when someone is breached that will tie to my prediction of criminal negligence. JEDI Lives. Per a joint status report filed late Friday with the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, Microsoft and the Defense Department have committed to ratifying the contract. Why do we care? Besides the obvious popcorn-watching nature of this case, this remains a high-profile win for cloud computing. And we care now because of the delays. Will that change the success of the program or not? It is fun to watch. There are several new surveys out to dive into. So how is recurring revenue holding up? In a survey by Channel Futures, about 1 in 8, 12% of respondents said their recurring revenue increased more than 20% in the first quarter, an encouraging nudge upward. About 27% said recurring revenue was up by at least 11%. In terms of cloud-related sales in the first quarter compared to the first quarter of 2020. 31% of respondents said sales were up at least 10%. More than 1 in 4, at 28%, reported no change, which indicates they're holding steady. Meanwhile, new Tech Aisle data. Their most recent small business, mid-market, and upper mid-market survey looked at collaboration as a discrete category and found that it is the second most prominent solution area and IT priority behind the cloud. Collaboration is a top IT priority for 96% of SMBs. The data shows that 72% of SMBs consider collaboration contributing to top-line revenue growth, which is an outcome of business agility. 58% of SMB employees expect to continue to work from home post-pandemic. But maybe not everyone feels that way. Horses for Sources has 2 polls to contrast. When they interviewed leadership from 400 Global 2000 enterprises at the end of last year, only 37% of them saw returning to an in-office environment. The latest pulse study, covering 800 Global 2000 enterprises, clearly shows a marked shift towards sending back to the office, with a 60% ratio of staff expected to be office-based over the next year. And while we're contrasting data, new research from Indeed. Entry-level tech professionals, those with less than 24 months experience, are looking for remote work. Between 2020 and 2021, searches for remote work among that demographic tripled from 3.5% to 10.5%. Data from Pearl Meyer, cited by Indeed, found that 80% of businesses felt pandemic-driven work-from-home policies were successful. 40% reported productivity increases, and 33% plan to keep U.S.-based workers remote after the pandemic ends. Now, why do we care? Story time. Providers are saying revenues are up, which makes sense as the economy opens up too. I wanted to put the SMB versus Global 2000 enterprises data in contrasts. SMBs will take advantage of the work from home more than big companies. And it could well be as simple as the bigger companies have larger real estate footprints to handle, or more legacy managers who can't take advantage of nimbleness. I still firmly believe the remote work genie cannot be put back in the bottle. New employees want it. Employees in general want it. Those big companies, their employees may be expected back in the office, but will they stick around when that gets imposed? Why you care is to take advantage of this. Adapt your offerings to help your customers take advantage of these trends and make sure you're building your own organization too. Helping companies tap into the distributed workforce, which involves so much more than just the technology, is where the need is. Amazon recently changed its terms of service and now allow customers to bring lawsuits against the company rather than having to go through arbitration. Why? Well, per the Wall Street Journal, the company faced 75,000 Echo users who were organized to file individual arbitration cases, and Amazon on the hook for millions of dollars in fees. So the company changed its terms of service, removing the requirement for arbitration to save money on the fees. Now, why do we care? The company did the math, and it's cheaper to potentially be sued due to the fee structure involved in arbitration. I've been highlighting financial motivations around security and noted the same line of thinking going on here. A class action lawsuit may be a lot cheaper for the company, win or lose. Let that sink in. They can lose and still save money. If you want the rules of any game to change, make sure the incentives align. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. Let's recap the security stories with some updates. JBS, the meat packing giant hit with ransomware, has indicated they're coming back online. The Russian-based group Revil has been identified by the FBI as the source, and analysts indicate there should not be price impacts for the consumer. For some context, cybersecurity firm Recorded Future says there have been at least 40 attacks publicly reported during the last year against food processors. The Steamship Authority of Massachusetts was hit on Wednesday. This disrupted ticketing and reservations for the state's largest ferry service. Chinese threat actors have been identified in ongoing campaigns designed to focus on governments. Beginning with spear phishings, the victims would then be hit with a toolkit which opens up the victim with a backdoor. Another identified active campaign is email-based phishing, targeting employees with emails appearing to come from the CIO, welcoming them back into offices. This is reported by Cofense, and the redirection is to an apparent but fake SharePoint site hosting documents designed to harvest credentials. In the scam front, crypto theft is up 1,000% from a year ago, per the Federal Trade Commission. Scams include fake currency exchanges and phony investment websites. The Biden administration's fiscal year 2022 budget proposal includes $58.4 billion to IT, including $9.8 billion for cybersecurity and a proposed $750 million SolarWinds response fund. That fund includes $93 million for, quote, SolarWinds breach remediation and security operation improvements, end quote. The bulk of the funding goes to licensing upgrades and security operations, including some new tools. There are also funds for modernization of infrastructure and a cyber response and recovery fund. On the research front, a survey of CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs by VMware shows 61% believed cloud had expanded the threat surface and they needed to view security differently, and 43% said they were planning to build more security into their infrastructure and apps and cut down on the number of point solutions that they run. Now, why do we care? Something has to change. Let's note that the Biden administration imposed sanctions on Russia, and we haven't seen a change in behavior. I'm going to extend my editorial from the weekend to note that cybersecurity companies benefit from the very problem created by technology. Licensing upgrades are a, quote, buy more, so existing software providers are getting more money, and without a specific guarantee it'll work. As I'm an advocate for paying for business outcomes, not for the technology itself, I find the lack of connection to outcomes to be most troubling. We're spending a lot of time talking about the criminals' activities in this reporting, and a lot less time talking about the negligence involved in implementations, nor the responsibility for damage. And we care because savvy providers are going to get ahead of that with their own risk management approaches. Don't take all the risk. While security related, this one was worthy of its own story. The Supreme Court has narrowed down the 1986 Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in a 6-3 decision handed down today. The ruling means federal prosecutors can no longer use the law to charge people who misuse databases they are otherwise entitled to access. Quoting the majority ruling, the government's interpretation of the statute would attach criminal penalties to a breathtaking amount of commonplace computer activity. If the exceeds authorized access clause criminalizes every violation of a computer use policy, then millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens are criminals. Now, why do we care? Laws evolve with specific case law. It seems to me, at first glance, that access to a system should not imply being able to do anything you want, nor being so broad-reaching it impacts everything. Seems the justices agree with me, can't be so broad. Here's why we care. IT providers need to become versed in the laws regarding use of systems. Your job isn't just technical, it has implications of the technology and how it's used. You have to know which laws apply in what cases. Now, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act does not apply for federal prosecutors. SAP is moving to flexible working for its 100,000 employees, particularly based on feedback from 94% of staff who wanted the greater working flexibility. Nearly half plan to work in the office 1 or 2 days a week in the future. Apple, meanwhile, has asked employees to return to the office 3 days a week, starting in September. This per an email from Tim Cook to employees on Wednesday. Office days will be Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays, with remote options on Wednesdays and Fridays. It also includes an option for 2 weeks a year, fully remote. Digging into telework data, new data from the Economic Policy Institute shows who's benefited from work from home, and it's those with advanced degrees, and by a significant margin, it's also overwhelmingly white. Why do we care? I bring up examples of each of these to provide insights and ideas for managers and owners to make about their own business. One size fits all is not the answer, nor is lack of decision. You will need to make decisions for your own organizations, and for those selling services, should be helping customers with the process. Why? There's value in that, and it's implemented with technology. The why of this decision for individual businesses is the real value, much more so than the technology. And remember, no decision is a decision too. Microsoft has indicated that a new generation of Windows will be announced and unveiled on June 24th. Expectations include UI changes, including visual enhancements, and the end of icons dating back to Windows 95. Also reported is changes to the Windows Store. Executives have used the phrasing new version in their interviews. Now, why do we care? Microsoft is teasing a new version of Windows, and it's a potential big change. Heads up. My weekend thought-provoking article. ZDNet has published their SMB Stack for 2021. It's a free ebook and has lots of items clearly designed to sell product. There's some interesting data about the projections post-pandemic and how long it will take to recover with upsides and downsides. But here are the highlights. 56% of firms have successfully adopted one or more new technologies since March 2020. 54% say the pandemic has inspired long-term digital transformation projects, with 45% planning to hire new tech staff in the coming 12 months, and 53% planning to invest more heavily in digital skills training. Conversely, 27% of UK businesses intend to cut down on IT spend as lockdown rules relax, while 30% of decision makers are worried their business will revert to old practices. And a final headline. Reliance on internal on-premise systems is down to 46% from 63% last year. Now, why do we care? The other reason to care about this article was the explicit inclusion in a technical stack listing products to buy of cyber insurance. Right there with a printer, a computer, and a website, you have to have cyber insurance. That's a service offering listed with the products. And notably, IT services was not in that list. Consider that disparity. And an almost 20% drop in on-prem servers in a year should not go unnoticed. If you say servers are slowly going away, I'd argue 20% isn't slow. Small detail to consider. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.